Hello and welcome. Anyone who's been to Merchant City Yoga on a Sunday knows how much I love catching up with everyone over a cup of my freshly brewed spiced chai. These Sunday chai sessions really bring everyone together. A true celebration of friendship, community and connection. And as these COVID restrictions continue, I want to try and capture some of that magic and share it with you at home. So I've invited some familiar faces from our MCY family to chat with me online over a cuppa. I'm affectionately calling them the chai sessions. Pop the kettle on, get yourself comfy and come and join us.
Hi Katie, thank you so much for joining me for my chai session. I've got a cup of tea already. And yeah, just saying there that we were doing a quick check behind us to make sure there was no random laundry. So just for people who don't know you, Katie, you teach our Forrest-inspired yoga class on a Saturday morning, and I was trying to remember how long you've been teaching with us now, and I couldn't. So maybe you can remember, maybe it's so long that we don't really want to say
that. Yeah. I think it was 2016 that I started, because that's when I moved back to Glasgow, having lived in Dundee for quite a long time. So yeah, quite a 5 years now.
Yeah, a really long time. And so I thought we'd chat today, you know, obviously because the circumstances we find ourselves in, that Glasgow is finally everything crossed, been able to very gradually lift some of the restrictions that we found ourselves under, even as the rest of the country moved into level 2. And it's really been making me think about transition and how our yoga practice can support and help us as we kind of go through any transition really, but and particularly I'm thinking about this one, and as we start to kind of move back out into the world again, I am kind of concerned that I might have forgotten how to behave in company, and start to reconnect with people and places and activities maybe that we've kind of lost a connection with over the past year or so. And I know from your background, you've done a lot of work not only with yoga training and somatic training, but in the realm of self-care as well. And I thought it would be really useful to get your thoughts and maybe how you're managing this transition.
Yeah, thanks, Judy, and thanks for inviting me along. I've really enjoyed all the chai conversations so far, so it's great.
Yeah, it's been good. I've been missing just a wee blather.
Yeah, it's good to just have a chat, isn't it?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a really good question. I think, my goodness, it has been a long slog here in Glasgow, hasn't it? And certainly a relief to feel that things are starting to open up.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think like transitions, it's been such a big thing for me over the past few years, because of also having a baby 3 years ago, or almost 3 years ago. And
wow.
I know.
Wow.
Could that be 3 years? So feeling like there's been a sort of constant transition. And I'm not going to lie, I've at times found it really, really tough as well. Found it tough to find my way to the practice and to keep going with it.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, I'm kind of finding this bit tough, the thought of transitioning. I'm going to say back, it's not a return, but transitioning forward again, coming out of these restrictions. Yeah. I'm almost finding that harder to contemplate than entering the restrictions way back. And I think, I hope a lot of people feel the same. It's not just me, that while there's a kind of relief and an anticipation, there's definitely a kind of hesitancy about it.
Yeah,
as well.
Definitely. I certainly feel like that, so I'm sure we're not alone in feeling like that. And I guess the thing for me about the practice, even though there has been times through these transitions that I've gone through, is when I do find my way back, if I've got a little bit lost with it in terms of the physical practice, it's like a refuge in amongst when everything else is changing, when there's just moving parts all over the place. Then it can be a place where we can go to kind of regather our energy. You know, if our energy is kind of all over the place trying to work things out, might be feeling anxious about certain things, it's kind of a way to regather, regroup, ground ourselves, and to find a bit more steadiness in amongst everything else that's going on, I guess.
Yeah, I know, because you know, obviously some of the anxiety comes from just overthinking and anticipating, and what's the word, catastrophizing? Is that what the parlong says?
Definitely.
You know, you just kind of get in your head a little bit. So coming back to that physical, that posture practice can really kind of help steady and keep you grounded, can't it? Can also frustrate the hell out of you.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that there's the thing of, you know, it's an opportunity to go inwards. So, you know, we are bombarded, particularly at times like this, with the media and social media, and a lot of it can be quite scary and kind of feed into our fears and stuff. But it's like it's an opportunity to just switch off from all of that. You know, like I'm doing that motion, so it's like, you know, creating a boundary and just going inwards and really checking in, like, how do I feel about all this? What's really going on? You know, when I take away everything else, you know, and it's also, you know, I'm definitely guilty of this. And as a parent, a young child, you can just get so busy that you can just keep yourself going, whether it's with work. I'm sure you've got so much going on with trying to organise what will happen with the studio going back. It's like you can just get so busy that you just miss out on that opportunity to just sort of stop and check in and think, okay, what's really going on for me and what do I need? And I think the practice is just the opportunity to do that, even if it is, you know, 5 minutes. That's all it takes.
I mean, again, there's a couple of common misperceptions, isn't there? And one is that your practice has to be an hour or an hour and a half or however long, like a regular class would be, and then you get into that realm of it's just something else that you've got to shoehorn into your schedule, something else to be checked off the list. And then, like, another sort of maybe a common misperception is, you know, I love the way you talk about it's a way of checking in, because I think a common misperception is that people come to the practice to check out, to leave behind their troubles and their worries, rather than sort of a more kind of active checking in. You know, they come in for an hour and a half, they feel better when they leave, but actually they only feel better for a little while, because all of the stuff is still there.
It's going to still be waiting for you.
Yeah.
But you know what you said about the practice not having to be a certain length of time is definitely what I found one of the hardest things, was coming into parenthood with that. You know, my practice was a certain length, it looked a certain way, and I didn't realise how attached I was to that. And so, wow, it's been such a process of having to let go of that, because you don't have a choice, and really asking yourself, well, what's this all about? You know, why am I doing yoga? What does it mean to me? And I think when I let go of how I felt it had to look, even though I would never have said that if you'd said to me at the time, no, I'm not attached at all. I definitely was. You know, so sort of that process of letting go and letting it sort of fit in and enhance your life, rather than it being this, like, has to be a certain way and for a certain amount of time. And I think coming into this transition, you know, as things do start to open up, if we can really feel, how can the practice support us genuinely, letting go of our expectations of it needs to be this length of time, it needs to be, it's like, what does it really need to be right now? Always knowing that, you know, if that's what you love, if you love practicing for that length of time, that will always come at some point. You can get back to that. But not being too rigid about that, because otherwise you miss the 5 minutes that you might have to just take a breath and kind of recenter.
Yeah, I think that's actually, just hearing you speak there, it's kind of, it strikes me that there are some parallels there, even with lockdown, because you know, a lot of people were maybe attached to thinking that they had to practice in class with a teacher, with other people. And so that transition to either practicing on their own or practicing online has something that's been really challenging, and even those of us who do quite a lot of practice on our own, kind of almost being attached to what that practice should look like under different you think your practice can be the same under different circumstances and different stresses, and then realizing that maybe it can't.
Yeah.
And maybe it's maybe it shouldn't.
Yeah.
As well. I think that's quite interesting, because it's like a pattern that comes up again and again, isn't it? That we think it should be a certain way in a certain place with a certain teacher. It's even like, when you get your yoga class covered and it's a different teacher, and people are like, oh.
This is different.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
So I thought maybe we could unpick self-care a little bit, Katie, because I know you've got loads of experience and you do a lot of work in this area. And again, I think there are some misperceptions around what self-care is, that it's all bubble baths and glasses of wine.
Which is lovely, both of those, don't get me wrong.
Yep.
Yeah, it's again, it's very much like the practice. Self-care is a practice. So I see it as something that can really serve us in our day-to-day. And so there's no specific length of time that you need to do it. There's what suits one person for self-care isn't going to suit another. But it's making a deliberate commitment to yourself, and prioritizing that. It's it comes back to the it's a bit of a cliche, but it's so true. But an empty lantern provides no light, or you can't fill the jug from an empty cup, or whatever. I can't remember that sort of thing. But it is so true. If we have depleted ourselves to the point of just got nothing left to give, then how are we going to parent? How are we going to run a business? How are we going to just be with our family and friends? And again, I think it's something that during lockdown has been critical for so many people. So many people in different circumstances. And I'm aware that I'm in a really privileged position where other people definitely aren't, and it's been really tough. But I do believe that whatever situation you're in, just some small deliberate steps that you could take can really make a difference to yourself.
Yeah, it's almost like switching your focus back to yourself and prioritizing that, even just for a really short period of time. It's actually one of the hardest things
totally
to do, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's why self-care and boundary work go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other, because in order to prioritize your self-care, you have to be able to set and establish some boundaries for yourself. So it's another area of work that I'm really passionate about at the moment, and kind of build into the other sorts of work that I'm doing with people, is about how can we set and establish boundaries. And a really big part of that is being very grounded in ourselves physically. So the yoga practice, or some sort of movement practice that's very mindful, really helps with that, because you have to be very in your center in order to give a clear yes and no to things. So self-care and yoga practice, the yoga practice can be the self-care, but they also kind of help each other.
Yeah. And again, one of the hardest things to do is create boundaries and say no, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, how have you found that? Because I know you don't talk about these things without walking your talk, so I know you're I know you'll be working really hard at these practices. How are you finding it?
Yeah, well, just to emphasize that, I came from, I would say, having a place of very, very poor boundaries of just always, I'll do that, I can take that on, and even now, again, it is something that I have to be really is a practice, and oftentimes I think, I've overstretched here, or what I really meant was I'm not sure, or I know about that, and I've done my sort of people pleasing thing, that tendency that many of us can identify with.
Yeah.
So again, I think for me, and boundaries when you've got, you know, a young child or young children, be really tricky to manage, and at the same time trying to model for them what good healthy boundaries are, and knowing, you know, I'm at the stage, you know, with a toddler that's very demanding and very clear. So helping her, you know, by setting good boundaries, I help her. And saying that, I know that I don't always get that right. So yeah, I think the way that I do it, like I say, for me, it has to be a very kind of embodied. What the practice of yoga has always done for me is to help me to really feel my own strength, you know, and to really, I've always loved that about the practice, that, you know, no matter what your practice looks like, whether it is, you know, the slower yin, there's a strength that comes through it, and that connection with your core and yourself. So for me, when I'm thinking about setting boundaries, oftentimes I have to just go back to the mat and just kind of feel like, right, okay, here I am. And then it is the, you know, sometimes it's just the practicing being able to say no to things. And sometimes it's the having to go back and say, well, actually, I'm renegotiating. And another part of the practice, something that I do around boundaries, is I practice it in advance. And what I do in advance is I also think about how is that person going to respond? Because you know that if you set a boundary, you're going to get pushback, you know, always. And in some ways, having a toddler helps because you always get pushback. So I can practice with her. She said, no. And so then you have to, you know, you have to kind of, you know, work out how you're going to feel when that person pushes back. And if you've done that in advance, you can work out how you're going to kind of soothe that part of you that's going to feel like, oh, I've upset someone, or, and just by practicing all that in advance, when it comes to the actual situation of, okay, now I need to be clear about what are my limits here, or what is possible, what's not possible, then it feels like you come from a much more centered place. So it takes a lot of work in the background.
Yeah. No, because it's quite funny, isn't it, that just after your kind of physical posture practice, sometimes things are just a bit clearer in your mind.
Yeah.
And like quite often that happens, and I'm just like, why couldn't I have figured that out or felt that before? And I find as well that sometimes it can dissipate quite quickly. You know, like when I finish my practice, I'm like, this is what I'm going to do, this is what I'm going to say. And I've had some ideas about how I'm going to say it. And like you're saying, I've kind of not quite rehearsed it, but anticipated what might come back and stuff. But then it kind of disappears into the ether a little bit when your day and life and other responsibilities. But it is pretty amazing. It's like a magical thing.
Yeah, I always have this sort of visual that we go about our day, and you know, we get demands in from certain, our energies just get pulled out in different directions. And the sort of visual that I always have when you come back to the mat, it's like you're just drawing it all back in. And even in some ways, like putting up a sort of energetic or physical boundary again. So like you say, you kind of come out all feel like, oh, I'm clearer about that. Or
yeah, I mean, another kind of way I quite like to think about it is that, you know, maybe kind of on a slightly bigger picture, it's like your practice when things are good and you're not troubled. It's almost like that's money in the bank for when times are troubled and you're struggling to get on your mat, or you literally don't have the time. The demands on you are such that you don't have the time for that. But because you've invested in yourself and your kind of health and well-being and the care for yourself as well, then it's there for you when you then need to withdraw.
Yes,
a little bit.
Yeah, that's like, yeah, definitely. And something, your conversation that you had with Emma in the chai session, and she mentioned about, you know, when you have a child and you know you have that fear you're going to lose the practice almost, but when you like you say, when you have it in the bank, when there is that sort of body memory of it, and it doesn't go away. So yeah, it's there.
Yeah.
Use it and you can draw on it.
Yeah, and I think as well, because again, you know, it makes me think that it's not just sort of parenthood, that any change can give us that impression that we'll lose our practice and might not get it back. So like there's all the physical stuff like parenthood or injury, but again, just coming back to this kind of circumstances we find ourselves in just now, you know, it's all change again, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And maybe people being concerned about coming back into a studio and or my practice changed or different. And I guess what I would say is probably everybody's has a little bit, and that is the way it should be. And it's natural. So we're all in the same boat with that.
So just to kind of wrap up, Katie, is there maybe a couple of really practical things that maybe you do that would be helpful for anyone who's watching, maybe just thinking about this transition or any other transition they're going through, and thinking about that kind of reconnecting aspect of what's coming?
Yeah, definitely. It's a great question. I think just as you were saying that, the first thing that came to mind is a kind of tool that I draw from somatic experiencing, which I've been studying over the past few years. And that is when you go into a new environment. So, you know, if we are for the first time going out to a restaurant or coming into the studio, is just to take a moment when you get there and do what we call orienting. So just, you know, take a look around the room and moving, you know, with the chin so that you're kind of engaging the brain stem, because this is, you know, where the nervous system would be connected. And it helps our nervous system to just orient to the environment and to check out, you know, this feeling of, are we safe or not? Because our sort of internal system is checking that out apparently 4 times every second. Whether we're, I know, so much work going on behind the scenes. That kind of blew my mind when I heard that. But if we sort of help it, this system that's trying to figure out if we're safe, and we look around, and even at the same time, if you feel like you can sort of push your feet into the ground and just really get that sense of, yeah, I'm okay here. And you might notice at the same time, maybe your breathing slows down a little bit, your heartbeat might slow down. So if you have felt a bit anxious going in, and just give your body that time to settle.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, it just is a really effective way of just transitioning, I guess.
Yeah. I guess it's just like giving yourself a moment to arrive.
Yeah, exactly.
Isn't it?
Just like we would do at the start of a practice.
Yeah.
Sure, might encourage you. You can do that anywhere. Nobody needs to know that you're doing it.
Maybe get out the head a little bit and just arrive in the space where you are. Fantastic, Katie. Well, listen, thank you so much.
Thank you.
For taking this time out of your day. I know. Cheers. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed our chat. If you've got any questions, you can email me or find us on social media. And until we can return to our Sunday chai sessions in the studio, I'll see you here next time.